Like that's the base of it all. You have to deal with things that are not just out there. You gotta, yeah, you know. Most of the time, it involves feelings that are both logical and illogical. That thing you're fighting about, whether at home or at work, it's about both what's being stated and what's not being stated. It's about what's on the surface and what's underneath. The thing is, most of us focus on the surface and ignore what's underneath, which is a mistake. Yes, it is. Oprah Winfrey is no stranger to conflict, and she's in a good position to comment on it, given how much experience she has had as an interviewer. She has addressed subjects as complex as suicide, infidelity, mental health, sexual abuse, and more. Situations that involve deep rooted conflict, like racism in America. I've talked to nearly 30,000 people on this show, she says, and all 30,000 had one thing in common. What is it? The thing every single person had in common, whether they were a firefighter or PhD, a dental hygienist or software engineer, according to Oprah, they all wanted validation. She wasn't talking about ego stroking validation like, you're such an amazing wife, or I can't believe what an incredible boss you are. No, she was talking about something more basic and critical when it comes to connection through conflict. Validating what the person is saying and validating that it's important to you. When Oprah spoke on career, life, and leadership at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, she touched on this. In particular, she said that all our arguments come down to three questions and three questions only. One, did you hear me? Two, did you see me? Three, did what I say mean anything to you? In other words, whether your partner is upset that you came home late again or your employer is trying to tell you they need another person on their team and why haven't they been hired yet, what they're really wanting what they're really wanting is to be seen, to be heard. They want to know whether you are truly listening to them and whether you care about what they're trying to tell you. It doesn't mean you have to grovel or kowtow or immediately change the situation by for example hiring another team member or promising you'll never work late again. It does mean you need to start by not defending yourself or addressing the content of the argument. It does mean you need to start by not defending yourself or addressing the content of the argument. If you actually want to soothe the person and resolve the conflict quickly, the best thing to do first is to help the person feel understood and that what they're saying matters to you. You're right. I've been working late a lot. I know it's frustrating not having me home for dinner. I want you to know that matters to me. I hear you. You've been juggling a ton of things lately on the team, managing schedules, responding to clients, liaising between the team and the engineering department. I see everything you've been doing and I appreciate it. According to Oprah and every psychologist ever, once someone feels that you see them and care, the game changes. The person's nervous system relaxes, their tone softens, the problem suddenly starts to seem more manageable. You can probably relate yourself. When you have a problem with someone, if you dig deep enough, it's almost always because somehow you didn't feel seen or heard. It isn't just that your neighbor parked in your spot again, it's that you felt overlooked or unimportant or frustratingly impotent. When in sharing your upset, you feel like the other person is actually seeing you and listening to you, deeply listening, not just saying they're listening, you start to feel different. You don't feel alone anymore. You feel like they're actually getting you. You feel supported. In Oprah's words, and this is a quote from Oprah, try it with your children, your husband, your wife, your boss, your friends. Validate them. I see you, I hear you, and what you say matters to me. Then watch the magic happens. And this is another one from Inc.com as well, and this one is by Yasmin Gagni, and it is under the female founders section, and it is titled "The Players Tribune is an online juggernaut." Yes, they are. She is the secret force behind it, isn't it always? Like we need to have female leadership across every major industry for like the next 20 years. Like one of my coworkers who believe in female power, like she was talking about it recently, and she said she doesn't agree with that fully because she knows from a woman's perspective, from a woman's point of view, women might take advantage of that, and it might not be such a good thing. And I counted. I said, well, put it this way, Suze. At the end of the day, the reason women come off like that right now is because they've had to deal with a male-dominated field. So when they get into it, it has to be, they have to deal with it from a man's, in a man's world, in a man's perspective. You know what I mean? It's a different ballgame. But if there's a systemic change, there's a systematic change where women just have to deal with making decisions from just on the same equal footing, equal level, it wouldn't be such. It would be a different world. Trust me, I believe that. That ain't no if, hands, and buts about that. That is some true shit. You know what I mean? Hey yo, 45. Hashtag I'm now with Kanye. Me in the street first. You know me. Second, now let me stop, yo. Let me stop. I digress, but yeah. By Yasmin Gagni, Inc.com. The player streaming is an online juggernaut. She is the secret force behind it. Hey, hold up, right? Oh no. In the streets, I'm a real OG. Speaking of the player streaming, right? My boy, Shaquem Griffith. What's up, man? What's up, man? Hey, Gillette. The Griffin commercial that you guys have done way better than the commercial you guys did, showing all the workers who work for you guys trying to compete with the, Dollar Shave Clubs and all that. Like, I know you guys know I'm right now, man. Those brothers, man, I'm trying to tell you. I wasn't in America to witness the greatness of Jim Abbott. I saw him later on in his career, so yeah. Yeah, I know where I'm going with it. Like, my boy Shaquem Griffith. He penned this on March the 2nd of 2018, and it is titled A Letter to NFL GMs by Shaquem Griffith. And it says, Dear NFL GMs, yo, listen to how articulate this brother is, you know what I mean? Listen to how articulate this brother is. Somebody who had a father who made sure that they actually got into their books and their academics, you know what I mean? Not no one and done way in kind of, you go and get some kind of degree to fall back on or something, you know what I mean? It could be market, it could be anything, like just something. Because you never know, you know what I mean? So just listen to how this brother frames. I don't think somebody wrote this for him. This is not something, this is one of those things where you can read and know, and you can listen to how this brother speaks on interviews and how he articulates himself. You can tell he wrote this himself. He did not have to have somebody write this for him. You know what I mean? By Shaquem Griffith. Dear NFL GMs, everything you need to know about me you can learn by going back to when I was 8 years old. So let me take you there. It was a Friday night in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I was sleeping, or at least I was trying to. My mind was going crazy because my twin brother Shaquille and I had a football game the next morning. He was in the room with me and he couldn't sleep either because if we won the next day, we'd be in the playoffs. I had my covers pulled up over my royal blue home jersey. That's right, I was sleeping in it. When I was a kid, I always slept in my football jersey the night before a game. That's how ready I was to play every Saturday. So the next morning when we got to the field, since it was youth football and there were weight restrictions, we had to weigh in. And I don't know if they still do this, way, but back then each coach will weigh the opposing team's players, and if you were too heavy or too light, you weren't eligible to play. I had to drop a couple of pounds to make weight for that game, so I had weighed myself the night before and again that morning, so I knew I was good to go. But when the opposing coach weighed me, he said I was too heavy. He told me I couldn't play. So I was heartbroken, right? I mean, I was devastated. My coach put his arms around me, told me everything was gonna be okay, and took me back into our locker room and weighed me himself. This time I was not overweight. I was thinking the other coach's scale must be broken or something. It didn't even occur to me that somebody might deliberately try to keep me off the football field. I was just a little kid, too young to understand that people got motives. That, yeah. So my coach took me back over to the guy who weighed me in so we could do it again. And now, this is a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly what was said, but basically the opposing coach said that it wasn't about my weight, it was about my hand. He said I shouldn't have been allowed to play football at all because football is for two-handed players. Mind you, I didn't even know this guy, so I didn't know why he had a problem with me playing. I had been playing for a few years and I was pretty good, so maybe he just wanted to keep one of our team's better players off the field so his team had a better chance to win. I honestly don't know. But this was the first time I ever had to deal with somebody telling me I shouldn't or couldn't do something because of my hand. Like I was defective or something, like I didn't belong. And that was the moment I realized I was always going to have to prove people wrong. I'm not going to get into an explanation of the condition I was born with that prevented the fingers of my left hand from fully developing, or talk about the time when I was 4 years old and tried to cut my own finger off, my own fingers off with a kitchen knife because I was in constant pain, or about when I got my left hand amputated shortly after that. That stuff you probably already know about anyway, and if you don't, you can Google it. The story is out there. And it's not some sub story or anything like that. It's not even a sad story, or at least not to me. It's just my story. I'm blessed to have thick skin, but I'm even more blessed to have a family that never let me make excuses or who raised me to never listen to anybody who told me I couldn't do something, especially because of my hand. My dad used to build all kinds of contractions to help me lift weights. He had this one thing, we called it, quote, the book, and it was basically a piece of wood wrapped up in some clothes that I could hold up against the bar with my left arm when I bench pressed so my arms would be even. We had another block that I used for stuff like dips and push-ups, and I had chains and other straps to hold dumbbells for things like curls and shrugs. And my dad used to walk me, Shaquille, and our older brother Andre hard. In our backyard, we had a couple of stacks of cinder blocks with a stick across the top like a hurdle, and when we would run routes, we would have to jump over the hurdle and do other obstacles mid-route. Then my dad would throw us the ball and he'd throw it hard, right at our chest, and every time we dropped it, he would say, "Nothing comes easy." That was kind of his motto, not just for me, but for all of us. Nothing comes easy. Man, I hated those workouts. There were definitely times when I wanted to quit. Sometimes when my dad threw the ball so hard that it bounced off my chest or it hit me in the face, I would be like, "I don't want to do this anymore." But he never let me quit. "You would thank me one day," he'd say. At the time, I didn't believe him. Now I understand, and I thank him every chance I get because all that hard work in the backyard helped me to develop the mentality that I can handle anything. That whatever you come at me with, I can come back at you even harder. That's what I did that day when that youth coach told me I shouldn't be playing football. I ended up being allowed to play that day, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was near the end of the game and we were ahead. I was on defense playing linebacker. The outside receiver ran the slant route and I read the play, jumped the route, dove in the air and caught the ball, flipping over onto my back to secure it before it hit the ground. It was the first time I had ever intercepted a pass in the game, and it basically sealed the win for us and sent us to the playoffs. I got up and ran off the field, holding the ball up in the air with my one good hand and thinking that from that moment forward, nobody was ever going to tell me that I did not belong on the football field, and nobody was ever going to tell me that I couldn't be great. I rode that mentality all the way through high school. I got picked up because I got picked on because of my hand, and I had guys trash talk me and stuff like that. But most of the time, I just ignored it. You know what this just made me realize? Yeah, I remember when America's current president made fun of that reporter that had a disability. Can you imagine if Shaquille Shaquem had went to the same school that dump truck would have went to around the same age? He probably had a lot of those white little racist little. But I'm just saying, I'm sure it wasn't just white kids making fun of him, but you can understand how kids like that grew up to become leaders of this. You know, I won my way, I won my way. It's like, no, let me stop here. Let me stop. Let me stop. Let me stop. Let me stop. I got picked on because of my hand, and I had guys trash talk me and stuff like that. But most of the time, I just ignored it. On the football field, I, I got off to kind of a slow start adjusting to the high school game. But eventually, I grew to be a leader and a team captain. But right here, because instead of talking about the success I've had, I think I would rather tell you about some of the most difficult times in my life, the lowest points. Because I think that's when true character shows. That's when you find out who people really are, what they're really made of. And the lowest points for me came when I was in college. I went to UCF thinking I was going to play as a freshman and everybody was going to know my name. I was so confident. Yo, speaking of UCF, yo, Scott Frost, what's going on, man? So it wasn't your genius that was the success behind that team. It was, you know what? I'm sorry. So I'm gonna leave you alone, fool. So I'm gonna leave you alone, Scott. I'm gonna leave you alone. You know what I mean, what's y'all? 0-6 right now? 0-7? But it wasn't like that at all. My freshman year, I got redshirted. The following year, I played well in the spring and worked my way up to second string on the depth chart. Then, right before the season opened against Penn State, I got bumped down. I got bumped down to third string. The next week, I got moved to the scout team, and nobody told me why. Whenever I asked one of the coaches why I was being demoted, they just said things like keep working and stay focused, and your time will come. So that's basically what I did for my first 2 years at UCF. I think the hardest part about those first few years was watching Shaquille play on Saturdays. We always told we've always told each other since we were kids that no matter what either of us is doing, we live through each other. His success is my success and vice versa. And we meant that. I didn't travel with the team much those first few years. When it came time for the team to go on the road, my brother and our two roommates who were also on the team all went. So on Saturdays, it was just me alone in our dorm room watching the game. Sometimes the game wasn't even on ESPN or Fox or anything, so I had to stream it on my laptop. I'd be sitting there on the couch alone, the whole dorm silence except for the game commentary as I was watching my brother play and living through him. I used to tell my mom all the time that college was a negative place for me. Not UCF in general. I love my school and I'll represent it forever. It was just that dorm room, man. Unit 412, room C. I spent so much time those first 2 years in Orlando sitting in that room wondering why I wasn't getting an opportunity to play on Saturdays. It got to the point where that dorm was just so filled of negative vibes because I pretty much kept everything to myself. I didn't really talk to anybody about what I was feeling, especially not to Shaquille. It's a tough spot to be in, right? I mean, my twin brother was doing his thing, the dream was happening for him, and he was earning every single bit of it, working hard and showing out on the field. I wanted that for myself so badly, and even though I felt I was good enough and I was doing everything my coaches asked me to, I wasn't even getting an opportunity. And the last thing I wanted to do was dump all my negativity on Shaquille and bring him down. So I made sure I was always positive around him. I never talked to him about how I was feeling those first 2 years. The lowest of the lows was probably the summer before my third season, when the coaches had most of the guys stay in Orlando to work out while other guys went home for the summer. They kept Shaquille at UCF for the summer. They sent me home to St. Petersburg. It was the first time Shaquille and I had ever been apart. I spent that summer working with my dad and Andre. My dad has a tow truck, so I would wake up at 7 a.m. and go to work with him towing cars. I would get off at 6 p.m. and go to my old high school to work out with the track team. Then I'd meet up with Andre around 8 p.m. and work with him until midnight, cleaning offices at the local Chevy dealership. I did that every day, Monday through Saturday, for the entire summer. I remember one time when I was working with my dad, we towed this one guy's car, and when we dropped it off, the guy pulled a $5 bill out of his pocket and went to hand it to me. And before I took it, he pulled it back and ripped it in half. He gave me one half and put the other half back in his pocket. I didn't know if I was supposed to laugh or if I should have been mad. I just kind of looked at the guy. He looked back at me and said, keep keep on walking, son, because nothing comes easy. I still have that ripped up $5 bill somewhere in my parents' house because I never want to forget what that guy said to me that day. It was the same thing my dad has always used to say to me when I was a kid. Nothing comes easy. And looking back at that time, I think I needed to be reminded of that. Because if sitting in my dorm room alone and watching games on my laptop was a low point, towing cars and cleaning out trash cans in those office cubicles at night was even worse. Honestly, that summer was the first and only time since I was a little kid jumping hurdles and trying to catch rockets from my dad in the backyard that I thought about quitting football. Those were pretty dark times for me. Then, after I went back to UCF for my third season and we went on 12, Coach Frost came in and brought me back into the light. You probably know what happened next. Over the next 2 seasons, Coach Frost turned an 0-12 program into an undefeated national championship team. That's right, I said national championship team, and nobody can convince me otherwise. You ain't lie about that. Y'all should have at least been given a shot, but I don't have a saying that the NCAA got bigger problems than playoff seedings. Along the way, he gave me the opportunity I had been waiting for ever since I first arrived at UCF, and I took advantage of it. I think, I think that what I did on the field, especially this past season, speaks for itself. So I don't feel like I need to get into all that. I'll let the tape do the talking. Besides, I don't define myself by my successes. I define myself by adversity and how I've persevered. I don't sleep in my jersey the night before games anymore, but I did sleep at the football facility for basically the whole preseason camp this last season. I went out and bought a blow-up mattress and a comforter, and then I went to Publix and stocked up on drinks and snacks and stuff so I had everything I needed. And instead of going back and forth to my dorm during camp, I slept at the football facility and lifted weights and watched extra film at night. I just knew it was going to be my last camp at UCF, so I wanted to get a full experience. I just think that as guys progress through their football careers, they start thinking about the game differently. They start thinking about getting their college paid for or making it to the NFL so they can take care of their families. They start looking at it as a job, and they should, because to excel at the highest level, you have to take the game seriously. It's a big responsibility. But I think some guys forget about why they started playing back when they were kids, how they loved the game so much that they sleep in their jerseys the night before a game. I started playing football because I loved it. And yeah, just like anybody else, my view of the game has suddenly changed as I've gotten older. But it hasn't turned into a job or an obligation. It's developed into a purpose. I've had people doubt me my whole life, and I know that there's a lot of kids out there with various deformities or birth defects or whatever labels people want to put on them, and they're going to be doubted too. And I'm convinced that God has put me on this earth for a reason, and that reason is to show people that it doesn't matter what anybody else says, because people are going to doubt you regardless. That's a fact of life for everybody, but especially for those with birth defects and other so-called disabilities. The important thing is that you don't doubt yourself. I feel like all the boys and girls out there with birth defects, we have our own little nation, and we've got to support each other, because everybody in this world deserves to show what they can do without anybody telling them they cannot. I know there are some scouts and coaches and even some of you GMs out there who are probably doubting me, and that's okay. I get it. I'm sure, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm sure probably only maybe 7 or 8 of the 32 GMs in the NFL probably read this. I'm not saying they probably not have other people read it and like tell everybody, but the GMs themselves read this, probably about maybe 7 or 8. I'm sorry. It's just, I only have one hand, and because of that, There have always been people who have questioned whether or not I could play this game. If you're one of those GMs who believe that I can play this game, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you and I'm excited for the opportunity to play for you and prove you right. And if you're one of those who's doubting me, well, I want to thank you too, because you're what keeps me motivated every day to work hard and play even harder. Back when I was 8 years old, I played because I loved the game. I still do. But now I also play because I believe it's my purpose. I know that it won't come easy, but I will fulfill that purpose, I have no doubt. Sincerely, Shaquem Griffith, University of Central Florida 2017 National Champions, 13-0. My man went in. My man went in. Before I go back to that ink article, let me delve into something interesting about our dumbass in chief. This is from political.com. It's by Darren Samuelson on October the 15th of 2018, 2 days ago. Mar-a-Lago member gives $150 to help Donald Trump aides mired in Mueller probe. A dump truck campaign donor and Mar-a-Lago member gave $150,000 to a legal defense fund set up for current and former Trump aides mired in special counsel. Hold up. These motherfuckers are so corrupt. They got a special fund set aside for legal fees for all their campaign aides and shit like that. According to a new filing with the IRS, Anthony Lomangino, a recycling mogul and major Republican campaign contributor, gave 2 donations in July and September to the Patriots League Defense to the Patriots League Expense Trust Fund, according to the trust's latest filing. Lomangino, the founder of a South Florida waste hauling company acquired by Waste Management in 2015, has also been a big recent donor to other Republican causes, including $17,300 in August to the National Republican Congressional Committee and $25,000 to Great American PAC, which backs Trump's 2016 campaign and is now supporting the president's agenda. The latest IRS filing for the fund, set up in February to help current and former Trump aides and associates who needs help hiring lawyers for the Mueller probe, shows $114,000 payments to legal consulting to Akin Gump Strauss House and Feld. Yo, those are some straight neo-Nazi KKK ass names, yo. Hey, do y'all realize that the governor, is it the governor of Kansas, Chris Kobach, his initials are KKK? Literally, a Republican governor's initial is KKK. How apropos is that? Hollywood could not have scripted that better. I'm trying to tell you, yo. It's unclear who Akin Gump, Bubblegum Fit, let me stop. It's unclear who Akin Gump is representing in the Russia probe, and a firm spokesperson declined comment. Other spending listed by the trust fund includes $8,400 to Schlatler and Honorato, a Washington-based boutique firm that has represented Keith Schiller, the longtime Trump bodyguard and White House security official who met with Mueller's investigators last November. ABC News reported in April that the Trump campaign paid more than $66,000 to the firm representing Schiller. I gotta find a picture of Keith Schiller. That might be who Melania Trump is sleeping with. Ooh. Hey, y'all remember that episode of House of Cards when Frank Underwood, played by the rapist peddling ass Kevin Spacey, Frank Underwood, and the bodyguard and Claire, they were in the kitchen and they got into the little, y'all know where I'm going with it. You can't put it past this fucker. You cannot put it past this fucking guy, yo. I'm trying to tell you, yo. This motherfucker is an ass. This motherfucker is an ass, yo. Please, man, please go vote. And I cannot tell you who to vote for, but I can tell you don't vote for anybody Republican. They are a problem, yo. They are a motherfucking problem. The Legal Defense Fund in its earlier hours reports has listed contributions from billionaire casino mogul Philip Ruffin, Continental Resources CEO Harold Hamm, Los Angeles developer Jeffrey Palmer, and Virginia-based consulting firm Proactive Communications. More than 2 dozen current and former Trump aides have been questioned by Mueller's prosecutors in the course of the Russia probe, but it's unclear how many of them have tapped into the Legal Defense Fund or gotten help directly from the Trump campaign. A draft agreement released earlier this year by the Office of Government Ethics said that the fund wouldn't be used by Trump himself or his immediate family members. That's a lie. It also said no one could draw from the fund if they had been charged or indicted for, quote, dishonest, fraudulent, or criminal activities, unless the managers of the fund determined the basis of the allegations were done in support of the Trump's campaign, transition, or administration in good faith and without the knowledge that such acts were prohibited by law. Legal mumbo jumbo, just so pay attention right here while I'm fucking you over here. The fund also doesn't accept donations from lobbyists, and anybody giving at least $200 during a calendar year must disclose the donations. Legal defense funds are common for people pulled into major investigations. Aides to former President Bill Clinton used one during congressional and special counsel probes during the Democratic administration. Former Trump aides Michael Flynn, Rick Gay, Roger Stone, and Michael Caputo have their own funds established to cover their legal bills. This is a short, nice, interesting read. Let me read that before I get back to the article about the woman behind the Players Tribune. This is from NBCNews.com. It's under their Thoughts Experience section, and it is by Steve Vladek, and it is titled, "Is Democracy Rigged? The Debate Over Senate Representation Ignores a Much More Plausible Reform." Expanding the House of Representatives would be a vast improvement over the status quo, with the potential to impact all branches of government. October 15, 2018. The controversial confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court has invigorated age-old debates over the representation or lack thereof of the presidency and the U.S. Senate. After all, a president who lost the popular vote by several million ballots successfully nominated a justice to the Supreme Court who was confirmed by exactly 50 senators who, between them, represent less than half of the country's population. The country's population is 302 million people. 62 million people voted for dump truck and his cohorts in Congress. Like, that's way less than half, yo. Like, man. I'm so hope my message did not get lost, yo. So hope that shit did not get lost. After all, a president who lost the popular vote by several million ballots successfully nominated a justice to the Supreme Court who was confirmed by exactly 50 senators who, between them, represent well less than half of the country's population. Numerous reforms have been proposed either to prevent this scenario from reoccurring or at least to dilute its impact. Among other things, suggestions have ranged from expanding the size of the Supreme Court to limiting its jurisdiction to pushing for statehood for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, and the 4 presumably Democratic senators who would come along with it. Perhaps, although it's not the only way to make our political branches more representative, changing the size of the House of Representatives would make that body far more reflective of the country at large. No, listen, man, all these reforms can come in later down the road, but one of the biggest hitches to a lack of a better reflection of the country at large. It's a lot of tactics and gerrymandering that's going on across the country, yes, because it's been such an historic lack of representation, lack of wanting to be active in the civic process, especially over the last 5 decades, by Americans of African descent. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm going there. I've been going there this whole time. If you think I'm not going to keep going there, I'm going there. The only way I'm going to stop going there is if we show up. Ain't no way only 36% of eligible voters in 2014 only went out and voted in a non-presidential election. Ain't no way. If we would have went out, just especially black America, if we would have just went out in that year specifically, it wouldn't have been like this. Obama would have definitely been able to confirm more than just 22 justices in these last 2 years. I'm just saying, those things matter, like Black Lives Matter, those little things matter, yeah. I'm sorry, but it does. Like Toby Ziegler said it on that episode of The West Wing when they were doing at the protest, and that police officer was guarding him, and they had a little nice banter conversation throughout the episode. Like, it's all about cadence. That's why I was doing all the cadence. Like, Black Lives Matter, those things matter. I try. Last time I checked, I think I had an IQ of about maybe 139. You know what I mean? Not that great, but up there. That was about maybe 6 years ago. It's been a while, I try. Perhaps because it plays no direct role in the judicial confirmation process, these more recent conversations have largely ignored the House of Representatives. That's a mistake. Although it's not the only way to make our political branches and through them our judges more representative, changing the size of the House of Representatives currently from a total of 435 seats to 650 seats, or one for every 500,000 constituents, would make that body far more reflective of the country at large, would dramatically affect presidential elections, and perhaps alone among all those other proposed reforms must be in keeping with the wishes of the constitution drafters. Guess what though? If they do that, the pendulum will swing again to the racist Republican side, who always to the Confederate slavery side. I'm gonna stop saying racist Republican because I can just say conservative slave or Confederate slavery side. It goes hand in hand. It means the same thing. It's just an updated version for the 21st century. You know what I mean? They will find other ways to gerrymander the fuck out of that too. To use all kind of tricks and tactics to make sure that representation is now reflective of the nation at large. You know what I mean? The only thing that stops that is representation by the people that reflect what the country is really like on a demographic level. Black and brown, we need to go out and vote, man. Every year. You know what I mean? Like every year, yeah. Other than appropriating seats among the original 13 states, the only thing the Constitution says about the size of the House of Representatives is that, quote, the number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least 1 representative. We're not exactly close to that floor. If there were 1 member of the House for every 30,000 people in the United States, the House will have close to 11,000 members. Concerned that this language was insufficient to ensure a truly representative House, the drafters of the Bill of Rights proposed, as the very first amendment to the Constitution, even before even the freedom of speech, not just a minimum number of people for every member of the House, but a maximum as well. Such an amendment would have ensured that the size of the House would have to grow in direct proportion to the size of the country. Although this amendment was the only one proposed in the Bill of Rights that was never ratified, Congress abided by its spirit for over a century, steadily increasing the number of seats in the House until, in response to the 1910 census, it expanded the House to a total of 435 seats. to represent 92.2 million people. Y'all know why they did that in 1910? Black America's population for the first time around that time has swelled to well over in the millions. And that talented 10th that W.E.B. Du Bois was talking about at that time, there was a thing where there was a greater educational representation in the black populace in that time. You know what I mean? Frederick Douglass was in the twilight of his life then. I think he probably might have passed away then. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm just spitballing here with the context of that time. You know what I mean? But it was one of those things like post-Reconstruction congressional policies and Supreme Court laws and shit like that. You know what I mean? It was one of those things that had to be fixed before it gets out of hand, because they saw the numbers of black representation that was coming. The white man has always been afraid. The black man has always been America's original boogeyman. He's always been afraid of the potential of the black man banded together on a mental, collective, intellectual level. That was true for 300 years ago. That was true 200 years ago. It was true 100 years ago. It was true 50 years ago when they killed Dr. King. It's true today, and it will be true 50 years from now in 2068. The only difference between now and 2068 is if we do go out and vote on a collective level, representatively on a collective level, and start actually paying attention to shit and knowing that we're affecting change that's trickling down to our trickling down and trickling up by our community improvement over the 5 decades. It might not be this bad. It might not be this bad. It's not a promise. I don't know. God knows it all. I don't know. No one knows. You know what I mean? It's not a promise, but at the same time, we will be doing something about it. Like Mandela said, man, poverty, like slavery and apartheid, are man-made, and they can be erased by the actions of human beings. You know? In the ensuing 107 years, the size of the house has remained unchanged, even as the nation's population has swelled to well over 300 million, 3.5 times what it was in 1910. Congress added 2 temporary seats when Alaska and Hawaii became states in 1959, but quickly took them away. As a result, the average member of the House of Representatives today represents somewhere north of 747,000 people. There are 3 major problems with Congress' refusal to increase the size of the House. First, and most obvious, it is difficult, if not impossible, for any one person adequately to represent the interests of 750,000 people. A member of Congress will somehow find a way to meet with 1,000 different constituents every single day, will still not see everyone they represent over the course of a 2-year term. Second, the size of contemporary congressional districts leads to a massive overrepresentation of some states and underrepresentation of others, since each district must be entirely within the same state, and every state must have at least one representative. Under the 2010 census, the basis for the most recent appropriation of House district, 2 states have under 600,000 residents per representative, and 2 have over 900,000. And for all of the criticism that the Senate receives for giving equal voting power to Wyoming and California, at least the Constitution mandates such inequality. The spirit of the Constitution seems to argue for the opposite result when it comes to the House. But the smaller the overall size of the House, the harder it is to apportion districts with roughly equal population as across state lines. After all, 5 different states are now less populous in total than the average House district. Third, and perhaps most importantly, a smaller House undercuts the representativeness of the Electoral College and with it presidential elections. Each state's total number of electors, the number of votes they have in the electoral college, is simply the size of its congressional delegations. That is, the state's total number of House districts, plus 2 for each of the senators. The smaller the total size of the House, the more the equal representation in the Senate skews the weight of individual electoral college votes towards smaller states. That was some deep political shit right there. If you didn't get all that, I told you what the article was, who wrote it, what date. Go find it and read it yourself. Please do. You know what I mean? I got it. It's hard for me to break it out and understand it. Time is of the essence right now, so I'm sorry, but it is. You know what I mean? So, thus, wholly surprisingly, the 5 most populous states in the 2010 census, California, Texas, New York, Florida, and Illinois, have the 5 highest number of residents per electoral vote. And the 5 least populous states, Wyoming, Vermont, North Dakota, Alaska, and Rhode Island, have the 5 lowest number of residents per electoral vote. To illustrate the disparity based upon the 2010 census, California has 679,000 residents per electoral vote. Wyoming has 189,000. Of course, expanding the size of the House wouldn't change the fact that every state also gets 2 electoral votes from its Senate delegation. That couldn't be changed without a constitutional amendment, which smaller states will have no incentive to ratify. But it would reduce the overall significance of those votes compared to the votes that reflect each House district. In the process, such a reform would not eliminate the disparity between large states and small states in the Electoral Congress, but it will substantially ameliorate it. Thanks, Mr. Leahy, for giving us the award as one of our words of the days. Ameliorate. And unlike changing the equal representation of the Senate, changing the size of the House can be done simply by statutes. The change to the Electoral College would follow automatically. As for how many seats to add without creating an unmanageable legislative body, a good starting point might be to reduce the average size of House districts by 1/3 to 500,000 residents per representative. Given estimates that the U.S. population today is roughly 325 million, that would mean expanding the House to roughly 650 seats. Coincidentally, the exact size of the British House of Commons. Another proposal is the so-called Wyoming rule, which would peg the average size of House districts to the total population of the least populous states, i.e., that is 563,622 under the 2010 census, would still be way behind the ratio of members to constituents from which Congress settled on a total of 435, which will require more than 1,500 seats today. But it will be a vast improvement over the status quo for the democratic representativeness of the House itself, of the presidency, and as a result of the judiciary. It goes hand in hand, yeah. It goes hand in hand. It truly does. It goes hand in hand, yeah. Okay. Back to before I get to that, let me read something that that Emily's List sent me earlier. Yeah, this is interesting as hell. Yeah, you know how I'm saying about, now replacing male leadership with female leadership. Emily's List sent me this on Monday, and it says, we can defeat Republicans in 8 governors' races this fall. You know why that is important, yo? Like, there's something called birthright citizenship. If you don't know what that means that if you were born in the country, automatically, regardless of what your parents' background is, what your ethnic background is, you're automatically a citizen of that country. The United States had that. And that was one of the legalese that justified, in that time, slaves of African descent, all slaves were of African descent anyway, it justified slaves being born in the United States being recognized as citizens of these United States, even though it meant something different to be a white citizen and a black citizen when this was talked about. But there's an effort, right now, especially with strong backing by uh, Ted Cruz and what you call it, and the Koch brothers and all of it. It's been an effort for a long time, but they almost have enough governors and enough Republican representation in a lot of states legislatures to actually pull this off. They want to amend that part of the Constitution that says that anyone born in the United States, regardless of where their parents are from, will not be an American citizen unless that parent was white. Like Germany has it. Germany has it. Like I have family members who had emigrated from Sierra Leone and lived in Europe. Some lived in Russia, some lived in England, some lived in Germany, and some of them has had family in Germany. You know what I mean? But they will not be considered full German citizens because their father and their mothers are not German, especially if their father is not German. If their mother is German and their father is an immigrant in Germany, they will still not be considered German citizens. But if their father is German and their mother was an immigrant in Germany when they met and conceived that child, he or she will be considered a German citizen. You know what I mean? I know a lot of Trumpites Americans might be thinking that's a good thing, but no, it's not. That's just dumb as fuck. It will go against everything this country has led and portrayed and represented and supposed to be about, you know what I mean? But, you know, I digress, so. And these are the states. So I'm gonna run down the name, like, literally, it is 8 races for governor across the country this year, this November the 6th. They're quite literally right now, these are all men. And if you look down, all these men have questionable backgrounds when it comes to the progress or the betterness of somebody who is now white like them. My only drawback from this is I only see one person of color running against this man. You know what I mean? I wish it was more. But that's why I'm asking Black and brown America to get involved. Like, we got to get involved on a consistent basis. So, here are the 8 races. Stacey Abrams in Georgia is going up against Brian Kemp. If you go to the ballot box, even if you voted for Trump, even if you voted for if you voted for Republican your whole life, please, if you care in your heart, you believe that your country has done some ills in the past and needs to be rectified along the way, even if you don't believe that, just vote for Stacey, man. Like, in Georgia, Stacey Adams over Brian Kemp. In Oregon, Kate Brown over Newt Bueller. What kind of name is Newt Bueller? What the fuck was that? In Kansas, Laura Kelly over KKK Chris Colbert. In New Hampshire, Molly Kelly over Chris Sununu. In New Mexico, Michelle Lugan Grisham over Steve Pierce. In Maine, Janet Mills over Sean Moody. In Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo over Alan Fong. In Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer over Bill Schuett. Governors can protect or undermine access to abortion. That's why it's so important we help our women win. See, I like Emily's list focus on that, you know what I mean? I get it, that's one of the biggest issues, but that's just window dressing to cover the biggest issue is the fact that these men don't need to be making decisions that are deciding the lives of women and children, you know what I mean? And this is another list for yesterday. It says 19 of our candidates are in races that have been rated as toss-ups by Cook Political Report. For the Senate, Missouri, Senator Claire McCaskill. In Nevada, Senator Jackie Rosen. In Arizona, Kristen Sinema. Yo, they trying to railroad that lady, Kristen in Arizona. She's crazy. In the House, in the Iowa's 3rd District, Cindy Axney. In the California 25th District, Katie Hill. In the Virginia 2nd District, Elaine Luria. In the North Carolina 13th District, Kathy Manning. In the Florida 26th District, Debbie Marcosel Powell. In the Texas 7th District, Lizzie Pennell Fletcher. In the California 45th District, Katie Porter. In the Washington 8th District, Kim Schwerer. In the Florida 27th District, Donna Shalala. In the Michigan, that's an awesome ass name, Miss Donna. In the Michigan 8th District, Elisa Slatkin. In the Virginia 7th District, Abigail Spanberger. In the New Mexico 2nd District, Xochitl Torres Small. In the Illinois 14th District, Lauren Underwood. What up, Lauren? What's going on? You've been doing some awesome work, y'all. I've been keeping up with you. Been doing some, yeah. Girl, we right here, man. Hey, don't you think that Louis Farrakhan, for all the talks he talks about, don't you think he can afford to do a lot more for those young brothers and sisters out there on the streets instead of referring to them as ignorant? He's in a position to financially, you know what I mean? He's in a position to, he has a platform. He has the organization and the resources, you know what I mean? I digress though. For governor, Stacey Abrams again in Georgia, Laurel Kelly in Kansas, and Janet Mills in Maine. They need our support to help push the odds in our favor. Donate to help reach our 400,000 FEC deadline goal by midnight tomorrow and help pro-choice Democratic women win close races. Ooh, and this is from my boy Bernie. Let's go. Bernie says, Alpha, let us stand together against voter suppression and for American democracy. Elections should be about candidates making the best case they can to their constituents and letting the voters decide. What elections should not be about in a democratic society is winning because your opponents are prevented from voting. And let's be clear, that is exactly what cowardly Republicans are doing right now. In Georgia, Democrats have an outstanding progressive candidate for governor, Stacey Abrams. She happens to be running against the very person, the Secretary of State, who controls the voting process in the state. And pathetically, that person, Brian Kemp, is working overtime to deny many African Americans the right to vote in the upcoming election. Secretary of States are in charge of state elections. That's why anybody who was alive during the 2000 election who remember coherency, like I remember, Catherine Harris, the Secretary of State of Florida, was the deciding factor, was the linchpin, was a catalytic deciding factor in Bush winning Florida and by proxy taking the election. You know, I mean, so the Supreme Court just went along with it. You know. Thankfully, the NAACP is taking action. They are not just running one of the most aggressive voter registration campaigns in the country, they are now going to court to make sure everyone, regardless of their race or income, can vote on election day. Trying to tell ya, man. Like I said, man, I'm just trying to do my part, yeah. Like, if you're tired of hearing me run my mouth about dumb shit, man, just go out and vote, man. Just go out and vote, you know. Taking on a reactionary state government and their undemocratic election laws is an expensive proposition. Would you make a $3 donation to support the NAACP as they fight for democracy and the right to vote in this critical moment? They are on the front lines of this fight and need our support. I feel like sorry to bother you. Yo, that movie, I went through that 2016 election cycle. I did telemarketing fundraising for that. Like, we're gonna get to that when I talk about my taxes and all that. How in the years I've paid taxes, you know what I mean. You know, when we talk about the comparison between this African immigrant and your elected president in regards to taxes being paid. 4 years ago, Stacey Abrams' opponents, the man now in charge of voting in Georgia, made the following statement. Democrats are working hard, and all these stories about them, you know, registering all these minority voters that are out there and others that are sitting on the sidelines, if they can do that, they can win these elections in November. He's right. Like, minority voters registering, the ones that are sitting on the sideline. You know? Gotta go out and do it, yeah. Democrats are working hard, and in all these stories